Folks. Today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite conspiracy researchers. His name is Michael Tsarion. That's Michael and then Tsarion, Tsarion. And he's one of the most popular researchers in the conspiracy movement, and he knows a lot about secret societies, the Illuminati, Freemasons, world conspiracies, dark sorcery, occult symbols, etc. And I've learned a lot from him. He's a very brilliant guy with a lot of knowledge, okay? And and he's very fascinating to listen to. There's a lot of podcasts with him on YouTube, and he has this really long series called Origins and Oracles, where he goes at length and shows you all these slides to show you the true history of the world and the conspiracies behind them. And there's like a lot of these series, like there's, series with Atlantis and with the Irish origins of civilization and astrotheology, etc. And these series are like 8 or 9 hours each, and they're very fascinating and mind-blowing, and it's a lot to take in at once. So, Tsarion is a treasure chest of information in the alternative research movement or the conspiracy movement, whatever you want to call it. And he also has a really good documentary called Architects of Control, which you can see on YouTube. There's several copies of it. And that one is really well made too. It's very tantalizing, very gripping, very powerful. And so he's one of the most advanced researchers out there when it comes to conspiracies, but the thing is, when I've listened to him for many hours, I noticed that he has a pattern of mistakes in various areas. And I thought I would point them out. And I hope that Michael Tsarion himself watches this video, so maybe he can respond to some of these mistakes or maybe clarify them, okay? And then he has a very big double standard when it comes to men and women, which I'll get into later on. But first I wanted to point out some of the trivial mistakes he makes. And I've seen him make these mistakes many times in his podcast, like the ones where like in the podcast with that guy, Henrik Palmgren on Red Ice Radio. He has a whole series of interviews with him, so you can listen to that and see what I mean. But anyways, okay, so let's get down to some of his mistakes. First of all, he says that the word Jew didn't exist until the 1800s, and he's mentioned that a few times. But the thing is, in the 1500s, Martin Luther, the founder of the Reformation, he actually wrote a pamphlet called On the Jews and Their Lies. So if Martin Luther used the word Jews in his pamphlet in the early 1500s, why does Michael Tsarion say that the word Jew wasn't used until the 1800s? I don't know, but every time he said that, his interviewer, like Heinrich Palmgren, he never seems to ask him about that. I don't know why. These are simple questions, but people like Heinrich Palmgren just miss them. They don't notice them. I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit more critical, so I notice these mistakes more than other people do, but most podcast interviewers, they don't catch these little mistakes. They don't ask questions about them. So in some ways, I would probably be better as an interviewer than someone like Heinrich Palmgren, because he doesn't ask very critical, sharp questions. And this is in spite of the fact that I'm not a person with a lot of charisma on the radio, because my voice doesn't exude that charisma that you need in order to be a successful radio show host. I am very articulate because I'm a writer, and writing is where my charisma shines. I do have some charisma in my writing, in my articles, because I say a lot of very controversial things, even though they're very true and deep, but I don't have that persona on the TV or on the radio where, where someone's voice really captivates you and grabs your attention. I mean, it takes a certain type of voice to do that, and I don't really have that kind of charisma or magnetism. But, some people do, and so they do very well in radio. Anyways, okay, so that's one mistake. Another mistake he makes is that he says that people in the ancient world before modern industrialization, which maybe was the 1800s or so, he said that the average life expectancy was only 35. Now that's been debunked a long time ago, because the people that say that people used to live an average of 35 years, they got that by mixing the high rate of infant mortality with the average lifespan. So they mixed those two up. And those should not be mixed up, because if there's a high rate of infant mortality, like infants dying right when they're born, that has nothing to do with a person's, life expectancy, a normal person's, Of course, if you average that together, you're going to get a very low life expectancy. But the thing is, once a person survives past childhood and into adulthood, they usually led a normal life, up until maybe their 60s or 70s, sometimes even 80s. So yeah, life expectancy was a little bit shorter in the past, especially in the ancient world that we know of, but it wasn't 35. It was more like maybe 60 in the 60s or something. Today, the average life expectancy, at least in America, I think, is like something in the 70s, maybe 75 or 80, between that range. Okay, and in the past, maybe it was about 60s, 60 something. So there's about a 10-year difference between the life expectancy today versus the ancient world. And that's assumed, you were a normal adult and lived a normal life and didn't get killed in a war or something, okay? And, you were relatively healthy, okay? So yeah, there's about a 10-year difference. So it's not drastic like today. It's 70s, and in the past it was 35. So this has been debunked a long time ago by various researchers. There's a lot of articles on this. You can Google it. You can Google average life expectancy in the ancient world and see what comes up. I mean, people will tell you that, people did live a fairly long life until their 60s, as long as they passed infancy, as long as they grew, as long as they made it past childhood, okay? So it's definitely not 35. That's a very outdated myth, and I don't know why a good researcher like Michael Tsarion still says that. I don't know. I guess, like I said in my other videos, that there are, a lot of people are really smart in one area of life, but kind of ignorant in another, and that's to be expected, because nobody's perfect. Nobody's going to be brilliant in every category, okay? We're all going to be strong in some subjects and weak in other subjects. So, maybe he's weak in certain areas, and so he makes a lot of mistakes like these. I don't know, but if you're someone that's well-read, you should know stuff like this, okay? And let's see, and sometimes I noticed that he uses a lot of quotes that are not referenced or that have no source. Like, he quotes President Franklin Roosevelt as saying, "If anything happens in politics, it's never by chance. It's planned. It's not by chance." That's a very popular quote in the conspiracy movement, because a lot of conspiracy websites show that quote, and a lot of conspiracy authors mention that quote too, and lecturers as well. But the thing is, if you Google that quote, you'll find that there's no original source for that quote. No one knows where it came from. There's no documentation for it. Okay, so when that happens, sometimes it's either a quote that was made up or maybe wrongly interpreted or wrongly heard, like misheard, or just taken, like an interpretation, or sometimes it's just a rumor that someone heard, like maybe someone heard him say that in a private conversation, but there's no proof that it's true. I mean, you can find very anti-Semitic quotes from the founding fathers if you Google them. If you Google what the founding fathers said about the Jews, you'll see a bunch of very nasty anti-Semite Jew bashing quotes from the founding fathers of America. But the thing is, those are not documented. They're not original. They're hearsay. They're based on what someone allegedly heard them say. So it's not considered a reliable quote. Because, if someone alleges that you said something, I mean, it may or may not be true. It's hard to say, but it's not a credible quote because it's not from you. It's not documented. It's hearsay. So yeah, there's a lot of quotes he uses that are hearsay that are not sourced. And it's not just Michael Tsarion doing this. A lot of other conspiracy researchers do that. Even David Icke does that sometimes too. But again, nobody's perfect, and they probably know that most people are not going to notice or check it out, these quotes. So, but I do think it's kind of sloppy journalism when you parrot these quotes that don't have sources. And I'm not sure if Michael said this, but I think he did. He kind of quoted an example from David Icke where he talked about the power of mind over matter, and that how your thoughts can create your reality. And they can influence your reality to a point, but they're not as powerful as they claim. And that's getting kind of new ageist because, and I think, you see, the example I'm talking about is where David Icke claims that because there are ceremonies, okay, where people can walk on hot coals, that somehow that's proof of mind over matter. And that's not. That was debunked so many years ago, and you could debunk that with basic common sense, okay? And the reason is because walking over hot coals has nothing to do with mind over matter. When you see videos of people walking through hot coals, they're doing it quickly, okay? They're not standing there, okay? When you do it quickly, it's like putting your hand in the fire. You can do it for a second and pull your hand out, and you won't be burned, and you won't feel any pain. But if you leave your hand there, it'll be burned for sure. So if those people walking across the hot coals, if they stood on those coals, their feet would get burned. It doesn't matter what they believe, okay, or how powerful their mind is. You're going to get burned if you stand on the hot coals and don't move. If you stand just a few seconds, you're guaranteed to get burned, okay? At least most people would. But of course, if you walk across it quickly, you're not gonna get burned, and that's just basic physics. I mean, you don't get burned until you leave something in the fire for a few seconds. If you just put your hand there for a second and withdraw it, it's not going to get burned. So this is not an example of mind over matter. I mean, there might be other examples that are better, but this is not one of them. And that's a very bad example. It's a stupid example because it's not true. So I don't know why David Icke uses that example. It discredits him. And when Michael Tsarion quotes it, or Jordan Maxwell, he might quote it sometimes too, it discredits them because it's a bad example. It's not true. Let's see, another thing. Oh yeah, Michael Tsarion also, he makes a lot of claims, okay, and does not source them. He doesn't tell you where he gets this from. For example, he claims that Adam, the first man, was not one man, it was an entire race of men. And Eve was an entire race of women. He doesn't source these claims, at least not in his lectures and his videos. He doesn't tell you where he gets things. And I've read some of his books too. He doesn't tell you where he gets this stuff. Yeah, he claimed that the men were prisoners and the women were more enlightened, and the women tried to wake up the men by giving them some forbidden knowledge to wake them up. And when they did that, the gods got angry and kicked them out of the Garden of Eden. You know, and so yeah, he makes a lot of claims, and I think the most bizarre one was where he said that during the reign of Queen Elizabeth of England, which was during the 1500s, he claimed that Queen Elizabeth I and one of her magicians named John Dee, okay, he claimed that they actually sent a spacecraft up into the sky to see if they could go out into space and leave planet Earth. But they couldn't because the spaceship hit the ceiling and they encountered a barrier around the Earth. And that barrier was created by other aliens or ETs that were involved in the creation of man. And they wanted to trap the Illuminati or the Anunnaki or whatever on Earth and didn't want them to leave. This brotherhood or this cabal or whatever. They wanted to trap them here and didn't want them to leave. So they put this impenetrable barrier or force field around the Earth. And so the elite, the Illuminati or the reptilians or whatever, the power cabal, they're trapped on Earth. And they can't leave because they want to leave. They want to go out into space and explore or go back to their home planet. And so they're trapped here by the barrier above the Earth. And recently I heard some article about some German scientists saying that there was a force field over the Earth and that nothing could leave. And I saw that on a few websites, so I don't know how credible it is. But getting back to the point, they claim that in the 1500s, Queen Elizabeth had a spacecraft that could go up to the stars, and it tried to leave the Earth, and it hit a barrier and came crashing down or something. And that is bizarre because, I mean, how would England have a spacecraft or even a shuttlecraft in the 1500s? You know, or a flying saucer or whatever. I mean, where does he get that? He does not source this information. He doesn't tell you where it's from, if there's any documentation for this. I mean, he just says it like it's a fact, but it's not referenced in any way. So you're kind of wondering where he gets this, and he doesn't tell you. And none of his interviewers even ask him. Heinrich Palmgren on Red Ice Radio didn't ask him. When he was on Coast to Coast with Jordan Norrie, he didn't ask him. When he was on the Richie Allen show, Richie Allen didn't ask him. When he was on the Vinny Eastwood show, Vinny Eastwood didn't ask him. So he's been on all these amateur podcast shows. Oh, and that other guy, Eric Carlson didn't ask him too, or Eric Carlwood or whatever on the Higher Side Chats. So you have all these amateur podcast hosts, and none of them ask the most obvious question, you know, or critical question, which is, how do you know this? Where do you get that? I mean, even the dummies on CNN would ask that in the mainstream media, the dumb talking parrots on the mainstream media. Even they would be critical enough to ask these questions. Even Bill O'Reilly on Fox News would ask these questions, like, where do you get this? How do you know this? But these amateur conspiracy podcast shows, and these professional ones too, like Coast to Coast, they don't do that. They don't ask the most obvious questions. I mean, are they stupid or what? I mean, how is it that I can see this and they don't? I mean, these podcast hosts are experienced. They've had lots of guests. They've had lots of interviews. They've been talking about paranormal phenomenon and conspiracies for many years. So why don't they have a critical mind to ask simple questions like, where do you get this stuff, Michael? How do you know this? What's your reference? What's your source? It's a very simple question. But apparently I'm the only one in the conspiracy movement that would ask something like that because, I don't know, am I the only one with common sense and basic logic? Is everyone stupid except me? I don't know, you gotta wonder, man. I mean, there's a lot of stupid stuff out there where nobody asks the obvious questions. Like there's this hollow earth theory, and there's this guy named Jan Lembrick wanted to organize a group of people on a boat to go into the hole of the hollow earth. I mean, supposedly there's holes at the North Pole and South Pole where you can enter into the hollow earth, and there's another world there with a sun in the middle. Okay, but the thing is, if that's true, okay, why can't you just take a plane, a private plane? Some rich person could buy a plane or even a jet and just fly right into the hole in the North or South Pole and enter the hollow earth. Why doesn't anyone do that? Well, I don't know, but no one even asked this question. Like when Jan Lumbrick or something was on Coast to Coast talking about his hollow earth expedition and how he wants to go there into the hollow earth with a boat. Why do you want to go in a boat? I mean, the poles could have ice around it and that could block your boat. That's very problematic. You can't just, go to Antarctica, in the center of Antarctica on a boat. I mean, there are 2-mile high ice continents. I mean, there are continents and land with 2 miles of ice blocking your way. You can't just go into the poles and through a hole on a boat. Why not, if you're going to organize an expedition, why not get in a plane together and fly through the hole? Wouldn't that be much simpler than trying to get on a boat and find a hole in the South Pole or North Pole? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But when Jan Lumberg was on Coast to Coast with George Norrie, he talked about this for 2 hours, and not once did George Norrie bring up this obvious question. Why? I don't know. I mean, George Norrie has a great voice. He's a great interviewer. He's great on the radio. I mean, he has a good voice. But he's not good when it comes to logic or critical thinking because he doesn't even ask the most logical question. I don't know. Maybe I'm just good at basic logic and a lot of people suck at it, including George Norrie. After all, a lot of these people are not critical thinkers. They just believe whatever. They're just entertainers. They just want to entertain you on the radio. They don't get logical and ask obvious questions. So that's why they miss even the most obvious questions. Like if there's an opening at the North or South Pole, why can't you fly through there? Why haven't other pilots that have flown over the poles seen these holes? If there are gigantic holes like that, it's only a matter of time before some pilot will see them while they're flying in the air. The government can't cover up a huge hole at the poles, okay? Some pilot is going to see them one way or another. Okay, but that hasn't, I haven't heard of that happening. So it just doesn't add up. Okay, it doesn't make sense. And, I love listening to conspiracies and paranormal phenomenon, and I'm sure some of it is very true. It's very interesting. But why am I the only one that would ask critical questions like these? No one else does. Strange. I don't get people. I mean, people seem to lack common sense and basic logic. see the obvious. Okay, now going back to Michael Tsarion, what else? Oh yeah, so it's a very bizarre claim he made where he claimed that Queen Elizabeth in the 1500s had a spacecraft or a UFO that could go out into space and it hit a barrier around the Earth. And so the elite and the royal bloodlines realized that they were trapped on Earth and that they could not leave. So the story is Queen Elizabeth had John Dee contact these macrobes, which are these entities. They're higher up in higher dimensions. It's the opposite of microbes, whereas a microbe is really small and tiny, a macrobe is huge. It's so big that it's going to make us look like microbes. So they're so big that we become the microbes. It's like we become the size of bacteria compared to the macros. So basically it's a higher form of life with a lot of knowledge that we don't have. So Queen Elizabeth had John Dee, who was codenamed 007 and was the original 007 or James Bond, okay, supposedly. That's where the James Bond 007 came from, supposedly. But Queen Elizabeth had John Dee contact these macrobes in some seance or using some magic called the Enochian system of magic. You can look that up. It's Enochian system of magic. Enochian. Yeah, Enochian system of magic where you can contact beings from the other side, from the other world. So he contacted these macrobes, and the macrobes told him that in order to get through the barrier, you would have to do several things. And first of all, you would have to find a way to convert matter into energy, and then later on, you would have to in stage 2, you would have to convert energy into matter. So Michael Tsarion says that stage 1 was finally completed in 1944 or so, when they detonated the first atomic bomb in New Mexico at Alamogordo or something. And so when they were able to create a huge explosion by converting matter into energy, okay, that fulfilled stage 1, okay, and then stage 2 supposedly is converting energy into matter, which they're working on now in Silicon Valley, according to Tarion. And they have to complete those two things in order to break the barrier so they can leave planet Earth. That's what Michael Tsarion says, but again, he doesn't source these things. He doesn't have any documentation or credible sources, so you don't know where he gets these stories from. He just quotes them as though they were fact. And that's kind of odd because it makes you wonder about his credibility. You don't know where he got this, or if he's making it up, or if he's just, what he says is even true, because you don't know. You don't know where he gets it from. He doesn't tell you. And not many people are asking him, if at all. It seems like I'm the only one. I'm the only skeptic. I mean, not that I'm skeptical of everything, but I ask skeptical questions when they're needed, because if you have a fantastic story like that, people are going to want to know where you got it from, how you know. It's just simple logic. Okay, so what else? But I think one of the biggest complaint I have with Michael Tsarion is that he has big double standards when it comes to gender, okay? I mean, it seems like he praises women a lot more than men. And when he compares men and women, he always makes the women out to be smarter than men. He never, in this sense, he's very politically correct, okay? And he panders to feminists, especially the New Age feminists, or New Age, what do you call it, liberated women that are New Age. Because I guess a lot of his fans, okay, are New Age women, or women that are into the occult and conspiracies. A lot of New Age and conspiracy stuff overlapped, so you get a lot of the same fans and enthusiasts in both camps. And so, yeah, they're more and more they're overlapping. So, I think what Michael Tsarion is doing is that because a lot of his fan base are women and New Age women, he wants to cater to them and tell them what they want to hear. And they want to hear that women are smarter than men, and that the female spirituality is lost and needs to be restored. So he's very politically correct in that he panders to this liberalism of gender equality, or saying that women are superior than men or better than men. Okay, he doesn't say that exactly, but he insinuates that. Okay, because one of the frequent comparisons he uses between men and women is that he says this, literally, in a lot of his podcasts, he always brings this up. He says that women have larger brains, so they have more synapses in their brains, and so that means they can make connections a lot faster than men can. So I think he's saying that they can see the bigger picture or make connections with their intuition better than men can, because they have larger brains and more synapses to make these connections with. And I don't know why he likes to say that a lot. He brings that up in almost every podcast, or at least half of his interviews. He brings this up. He always, it insinuates that women are smarter than men, and he has this need to bring it up in most of his podcasts, or at least half of them. And I don't know why he's fixated on this comparison, because it's kind of bogus, okay, and it's unfair. It's a double standard. Okay, maybe women do have more intuition than men in some ways about some things, but obviously men are smarter than women in a lot of other ways, like in math and science and chess, computer programming, linear logic, philosophy, engineering, computer programming and coding, inventing things. When you total it up, men are smarter in more areas of life than women are. It's a no-brainer. It's an absolute historical fact. So why doesn't Michael Tsarion mention that? Oh, I know why. Because it's taboo. Because it's politically incorrect. For some reason, in American and Western society, you cannot say that men are better at women than anything, in any way. No matter how obvious, you can't say that. Because it's sexist. It's offensive. Even if it's 100% true, it's offensive. It's sexist. For example, even if I say men are stronger than women physically, on the average, of course, that's taboo. It's offensive. It's sexist. You're not allowed to say that. You go into hot water as soon as you say that. Or I could say something very obvious, like men are a bit better at fixing cars, at building houses than women are. And this is obvious because when you go out, anytime you see a group of construction workers building a house, it's always a group of men. You don't see a group of women building houses. And when you take your car to be fixed, usually it's a man fixing your car. You don't see women fixing your car. Even when you get an oil change, it's usually always a man. Okay? You just don't see women doing that kind of thing. So it's obvious that men are better at these things, but there's just this rule in society. You're not allowed to say that. Michael Tsarion panders to this political correctness. And that's kind of hypocritical because he speaks out against political correctness. He says that political correctness is stupid, it's mind control. But if he feels that way, then why is he being politically correct himself? Why is he giving into it if he thinks it's mind control and it's a bad thing? This is a major hypocrisy on his part. And I get the sense that The reason he says that is because to him, political correctness is not about saying what you want on social issues. When he describes political correctness, what he usually refers to is the taboo against speaking out against your government, or talking about conspiracies, like like the 9/11 truth movement, or 9/11 was an inside job or something like that. He's talking about that. To him, that's being politically correct. It is not criticizing your government or not criticizing the media, and to just follow the official story. But that's not really what political correctness is. Political correctness usually is in regard to social issues and personal issues like race, gender, age, equality. It means it's not offending people. It doesn't mean that it's not offending the elite or the government. Okay, so when he talks about political correctness, he insinuates that it means not to criticize the government. But that's not how most people see political correctness. Okay, it's not about offending your government or offending the elite or the rulers or the cabal that runs America. Okay, that's not what it means. It means not to offend the mass audience, the mass crowd. Okay, it means you have to be very polite, very non-controversial, be very positive when you talk about people, especially when you talk about people's race or gender, or even sexual orientation. So you have to portray everyone in a positive light. That's what political correctness is. It means you never say anything negative about any group, not about women, not about minorities, not about gays, not about immigrants, not even about Muslims. But of course, it's okay to bash men because, the Western media says men are creeps. They're predators. They've done a lot of bad things. They oppressed women in the past. So it's okay to bash men, especially white men, because they've conquered countries and colonialized the world. So apparently it's okay to bash men, especially white men. It's an obvious double standard, and it's ridiculous, of course. But the thing is, Michael Tsarion panders to this. Okay, if he's going to talk about some way that women are better than men, why doesn't he do the opposite? Why doesn't he talk about something that men do that's better than women? He never does that. Never. Not once. Not once. Because he's politically correct. Okay. And so why then is he saying that he's not politically correct, and that the political correctness is mind controlled by the media? If it's mind control, then he should be against it if he's condemning it. So why is he politically correct himself? It's stupid. This is an obvious hypocrisy on his part. It's crystal clear. If you listen to this guy for many hours, you'll catch this. He is very politically correct when it comes to gender. You see, there's this politically correct rule. There's this social rule in Western society, at least, okay, that whenever you compare men and women, okay, you always have to say something that makes the women somehow come out on top. You have to say something that makes the women sound better than men, or better at something, or more superior in some way. Okay, that's a social rule in America, and it's been a social rule for many years. And even though it's not an official rule, it's a social rule because everyone follows it. Even comedians follow it. Even Jay Leno on The Tonight Show, even he follows this rule. So if everyone is following this rule, it's a social rule. Regardless of whether it's spoken or unspoken, it's a rule because everyone follows it. So even a comedian that's making jokes, whenever he compares men and women, he has to make fun of the men and make the women sound somehow smarter or come out on top over men. That is political correctness, because it's a rule everyone follows, and if you don't follow it, you'll offend people. You will cross some type of boundary if you don't follow this rule, and people will hate you, they'll be offended. You cannot say men are smarter than women, you have to say women are smarter than men. But that's not the reality. The reality is that men are smarter than women in most areas, okay? Okay, women are smarter than men in only a few areas, like maybe their fashion sense. They know more about cosmetics and perfume, of course, and about interior design, decorating a house. They're better at that. Maybe they're better in cooking, okay, and it seems they're better in learning a foreign language too, especially when young women. They seem better at picking up a new language. They're better at reading the mind of a baby, especially their baby. I mean, of course, when they have a baby, a mother can read the mind of the baby a lot better than the father can. So the mother is more in touch with the baby's needs. So of course they're better at taking care of babies. That's a no-brainer. No one would disagree with that. Not even feminists would disagree with that. Okay. But these are just a few areas, a small handful of areas. In most things, men are better. They're better in chess, in logic, in math, in science, in philosophy, in inventing new things. Look at all the things around you that are invented, all the new technologies. They're all invented by men. Cars, planes, trains, boats, ships, machines, computers, electronics, television, radio, the internet, smartphones, cameras, movie cameras. Everything around you that has to do with technology was invented by men. Even the hair dryer that women use when they dry their hair, that was invented by men too. Virtually everything is invented by men. Men invent things, men create things, they innovate things. And women, on the other hand, they don't invent things, they don't create new things. What they do is they follow trends, they follow what's popular, they conform to society. And of course, they're obsessed with how they look. They care about what other people think of them. They care about how they look, about how their clothes look, whether their clothes match, whether the colors match. They care about how their car looks, how the refrigerator looks, how their house looks. They care about how they look and what other people think. And they follow trends and whatever's popular. They go for whatever's popular. They follow the trends. So basically they're conformists, they're followers, they're copiers. Okay, they don't invent things, they don't create new things. They don't think outside the box to create something new or to invent things. Okay, so women are not builders, they're not creators, they're not innovators, they're not inventors. Okay, they're followers. So how are they smarter than men? They're not. Not at most things, and definitely not when it comes to thinking outside the box or inventing things or creating things. No. I mean, is there any female equivalent of Thomas Edison or Albert Einstein or Nikola Tesla or Leonardo da Vinci? There are no female equivalents of those things because women don't invent things. Okay, they're not usually geniuses. Okay, and if they are smart, they're usually just smart in terms of their ability to memorize things, like large amounts of data in books. Like they might be able to read lots of books and memorize a lot of facts, and then take a test and then get a degree at a university because of that. But that is not being smart. That's just memorizing large amounts of data to take on tests. That's basically a memorization machine. That doesn't make you smart. Being smart is like being truthful. It's being, truthful about reality. It's being deep. It's being able to see deep. It's having insight. It's being able to think outside the box and invent new things. Women are not strong in those areas at all. So in all these things, men are smarter than women. It's obvious, at least in most areas. But people like Michael Tsarion will never say that because it's taboo, because they are politically correct. They do not want to offend their female audience. Okay, so that's a hypocrisy. There's no doubt that Michael Tsarion is politically correct when it comes to gender. He has double standards. He only wants to say that women are smarter than men because they have bigger brains and more synapses. But he'll never say that men are smarter than women in anything. Anything. Even though it's 100% true, he won't say it because he is politically correct. And he has to be because he's catering to this new age audience, and a large percentage of his audience are women. And they don't want to hear that men are smarter in anything. They want to hear that women are smarter and that the patriarchy is oppressive. And here's another thing. I've noticed that when Michael Tsarion talks about ancient societies, like the ancient Celts, he'll say that they were a matriarchy, which means the women were in charge and the men were not. They were a matriarchy. And he'll say that as though that were something better. And so I've heard this from other people, okay, and I don't know if it's true or not, but other people have told me that Michael Tsarion is a matriarch, is in favor of the matriarchy. He believes that women should be in power, they should rule society, just like it was in the ancient Celtic days, or with maybe some tribe in Africa or in South America, maybe. There were also other matriarchies, but they're usually very primitive tribes that have matriarchies, okay. Like the ancient Celts or the ancient Africans or the ancient tribes in South America, okay? Yeah, some of those might have been matriarchs, okay? At least that's what is officially said, okay? So what I've heard is that he is in favor of the matriarchy. And though he does not say that directly, okay, he implies it. Because when he talks about matriarchal societies, he talks about them as though they were better, as though that's the way it should have been. So you get this sense that he believes that women should be in power. They should rule because they're superior to men. And that makes no sense because women, even in ancient times, women, they all they were nurturers. Okay, women did not hunt. They did not build houses. Okay, they did not fight wars. Okay, an army of women versus an army of men is not going to win. There's never even been a great female general in history. At least not a military general. Okay, and there haven't even been very many great female leaders in history. Not just generals, but leaders in general. There's not very many good female leaders. Even today, there aren't very many, if any. There might be a small percentage, but most female leaders are not very good leaders. And I'm talking about if they're presidents or prime ministers. Sometimes they're mediocre and they're okay. Like maybe Margaret Thatcher was when she was Prime Minister of England. But there's never been a great, superb leader that's been a female. There might be a few, but just not very many, very, very few. Okay, but in terms of military general, no, there's never been. And that's not sexist, that's just a historical fact. the historical record says that there's never been a great female general in history because they're not good at military strategy. They're not good at war tactics. They're not good at organizing a battle. It's just not in their DNA. It's not in their instinct to do that. They prefer to get along. They prefer social harmony. They prefer to be kind to others. Okay. They're just not good at warfare. I mean, that's something men are better at. And men are better at building houses too, and building societies. And in hunting too. You need to be athletic and strong to hunt animals. And so men have traditionally done that. So if men are the providers and the builders, why should women be the leaders? It doesn't make any sense. There's no logic to it. It's just upside down feminism. It's an attempt to make men weak. It's an attempt to overturn society. It's an attempt to make communism the norm so that everyone is weak and equal. And that's bad. That's bad. I think it's better to make people strong, not weak. Okay, but these people, they want to make people weak, especially the men. So that's not a good thing, and I don't know why Michael Tsarion supports that. He shouldn't, because he's supposed to be a free thinker. He's supposed to be a truth seeker. He is supposed to be someone that is on the side of good. He's supposed to be on our side. He's supposed to be on the side of truth and justice and righteousness. So why is he saying all these pro-feminist arguments and supporting these damaging philosophies about how women are better than men and how they should be in power and how they should be the leader and how society should be matriarchal rather than patriarchal, when basic logic says that men ought to be the leaders because they're better at that kind of thing. They're better at leadership. They're better. I mean, all the greatest leaders in history have been men. That's just a historical fact. It's not sexist. It's not prejudice in any way. It's just history. It's just fact. And you gotta accept that even if you don't want to. So it's very odd and it's bad and it's disturbing that a great conspiracy intellectual like Michael Tsarion would do this. He's pandering to feminists and to communists and to liberals by saying that women are smarter than men, are better than men, and they ought to be in charge. And he won't even name one way in which men are better than women or smarter than women, because he follows that rule, the social rule, the unspoken one, which says every time you compare men and women, you must make the women sound better than the men. That's the rule. Everyone follows it. Everyone, at least anyone that has visibility on TV or anyone that has good publicity, they know they have to follow that, and they do. I'm one of the few people exposing this and being honest about it, even though it's obvious. This is one of those things where everyone knows, and because it's so obvious, but no one talks about it or complains about it because you're not supposed to. It's like the emperor's new clothes. Everyone can see the double standard here, but they're afraid to talk about it because you're not allowed to. You're not supposed to. It's offensive to talk about this. It goes against the grain. You're going against the crowd. It's taboo. So that's the problem in American society is that truth is a taboo. Even 100% truth is a taboo. Even the most obvious truth is a taboo. Like even if you just say men are better at building houses and fixing cars and making home improvements and fixing the roof, everyone knows men are better at those things. Even feminists know that. But you can't say it because it's taboo. So truth is a taboo in Western cultures like America especially. And that's a sad thing. It's a tragic thing because it means you can't live in reality. You're living in a fake illusion. You cannot be honest. You cannot be truthful about reality. You cannot say things the way they are. You can't tell it like it is. You can't be upfront and state the obvious. And that's sad because it means we're no longer living in reality. We're no longer allowed to be honest. We're living in a fake reality where women are smarter than men, and that's not true. Not only are men smarter than women in most intellectual areas, but in most physical areas as well. Like in professional sports, in boxing, in wrestling, in most professional sports. You know, there's exceptions. Maybe women are better at some sports like gymnastics or figure skating. But in most sports, men are better. That's why in professional sports, they never have men competing against women, okay? Never. For example, in the NFL, you'll never see a team of men competing against a team of women because that's not fair. The men would kill the women in football in a serious game. You know, as long as they don't let them win, of course. But you get the point. I mean, you can't, you know, they're not equal, so you can't have them compete in professional sports. And that goes the same with basketball, with baseball, with soccer, even with tennis and badminton, okay? In tennis and badminton, you have mixed couples, okay? I mean, you have mixed doubles, okay? Which is one man and one woman versus one man and one woman. Or you have same-sex doubles. 2 men versus 2 men, or 2 women versus 2 women. And you have mixed doubles too, like 1 man and 1 woman versus 1 man and 1 woman. But you never have the kind of doubles where you have 2 men against 2 women. Not even in tennis or badminton, you don't have that. Why is that? If they're equal, why not? Because they're not equal and they're different. That's the reality. Everyone knows that. But you can't say that, okay? And, you know, and something obvious like boxing or combat or fighting. I mean, women cannot compete with men in that either. Not in physical combat. So basically in most physical areas and in most intellectual areas, men dominate. Men are better at more things. Women are better at getting attention and looking beautiful, and because they're more desirable, they're more attractive. So women get more attention, they get more desire thrown at them. They are more desirable, they are more beautiful, they are more attractive. So women get more attention than men. That's the only thing they're better at, besides, you know, like taking care of babies or fashion or something like that. The only thing they're better at getting at it is getting more attention. They're better on Facebook at getting more likes. That's why anyone knows that on Facebook, women get a lot more likes, a lot more comments, and a lot more attention than men do. Because women are good at that. They get a lot of attention. They get a lot of sympathy, a lot of praise. People notice them because women are more attractive. People pay attention to them. Men will pay for sex. Men will pay women for sex even. But you don't see women paying men for sex, no. Because women are more desirable. They have a higher sexual value, you know. So they have power over men in that sense. So they are better at being more beautiful and getting more attention than men are, of course. We all know this. But in terms of skills and talents, no, women are not better than men. Men are better at most things than women when it comes to skills and talents. And when you talk about IQ, the difference between a woman's IQ and a man's IQ is this, okay? This is well documented, okay? Despite what the liberal media tells you, the real IQ tests tell you that women's IQs, okay, they tend to hover around the mediocre range. around average intelligence, okay? Because women don't need to be too smart, okay? They just need to be good nurturers. They need to be good mothers and wives. They're designed by the universe or by the creator or by God or by Mother Nature or whatever. They're designed to be nurturers. So they only need an average IQ. They don't need to be super smart or super stupid. They're usually mediocre in their IQ range, about average. So they hover at that range, whereas men's IQs are on a very broad spectrum. They go from very low to very high. I mean, there's very stupid men with low IQ, there's average men, and then they range up to super genius men. So a man's IQ is very diversified, so there's a big variety with men. Let me see something here. So it's not true that women are smarter than men. I mean, sure, some women are smarter than some men, especially if you compare to low IQ men. But if you take the higher IQ men, with those who have IQs above 100, they're going to be smarter than most women are. So it's not true that women have higher IQs than men or are smarter. There's no evidence for that at all, period. And like I said before, in most things, intellectual or mental, men are better at those things. I mean, that's why when you go to an IT department, they don't usually hire women for computer programming or to code software or something, because they're just not, they don't think logically enough to do that. They usually hire men for computer programmers, and they hire women as service workers because women are better at that. They're more pleasing, they're more attractive to look at. But when it comes to something you need a lot of logic with, like computer programming, men are better at those things. They're better at linear logic. And I think Michael Tsarion would agree with that too. He knows this. It's obvious. He's not stupid. He knows this. He just doesn't want to say it because he has to abide by political correctness. He has to cater to his female fan base, his female audience. Otherwise, if he offends women, he'll lose his female audience and he might not make as much money from his books and DVDs. He might not get all these lecture tours and speaking arrangements that he gets at paranormal conferences. He does a lot of lectures at paranormal conferences, at conspiracy conferences, like Conspiracy Con, for example. So if he ever says something that's not politically correct, like men are smarter than women in any way, he might not get invited. I mean, and he knows that, so he has to pander to political correctness, Anyways, I'm sure you get the point of what I'm talking about. I've talked about this at length and probably have repeated myself, but this is a rant, so, when people are ranting, they do tend to repeat themselves, especially Americans. Americans are very fond of doing that, of repeating themselves in a talk like this. But you get the point, I mean, I don't know, I guess I'm one of the few people that are very consistent. If you listen to my videos and read my books and articles, you won't find very much hypocrisy, okay? But even someone brilliant like Michael Tsarion, he's going to have some hypocrisy, and I pointed them out right there, And that's sad because he's supposed to be a free thinker and a truth seeker. So, anyways, Michael, I hope you're watching this, and if so, I'd like you to give a response and to explain all this, because I know that I'm right. I mean, I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, many hours of your podcasts, and I know what you say, and so I've hit the nail on the head. This is spot on. I mean, you can't deny this. This is true. This is a pattern in your podcasts. As a male, I should be offended because you always say women are smarter than us, and you never say men are better at anything, nothing, not even fixing cars. Other people might admit that, but you don't admit that because you don't want to offend women. It's not your philosophy. It seems like you believe in a matriarchy. You believe that women should rule, that they are superior, that we should worship a goddess, that we should call God a she rather than a he. I could spin that around and say, hey, that's not fair. Why should God be a she? Why not a he? I could spin it both ways. And this is kind of a moot point. I mean, it doesn't really matter if God is a he or a she. I mean, who argues about that? I mean, it's just petty, it's trivial. Okay, so yeah, I hope, Michael Tsarion, if you're listening to this, that you can address these points and maybe give some source documentation or references for all these quotes and theories you keep talking about, which you don't reference. I hope maybe you can do that on a future podcast or in some of your books or on your website or even with me, Okay, well, thanks for watching, everyone. If you got this far, I thank you for your time. I don't mean for these rants to go on this long, but they just do somehow, naturally. So I thank you if you've gotten this far, and I hope you enjoy my video rant. And if you like what I say, hit the subscribe button below and subscribe to my channel. I know that's a cliche, but I got to try to get more subscribers too, to get my message out there, especially my happier abroad message. Anyways, thanks for watching, you guys. Be healthy, be safe, and God bless you, and talk to you next time.